It's good to see all of you here today. If you have a Bible, go to 1 Peter. 1 Peter, if you don't have a Bible, there should be one underneath the seat in front of you. And if you don't know where yours is, then that's our gift to you. 1 Peter. We are going to be going through for the next weeks, months, however long it takes, through this book, through this letter. And at the series we're calling People in the Fire. Just curious, as we get started, have you ever been in a place, like showed up somewhere where you just knew you didn't belong? You ever had that experience? Like, I don't know if I belong in this place. I mean, I've had several of those experiences in my life. There's been places, like there's been restaurants we've shown up to, like, oh, this is way too fancy for us, and that kind of thing. We didn't know how to act or where to go, what to do. And when I was thinking about this, last night I was thinking about this, and I thought about a time several years ago. My wife and I, before we were married, we were attending the same church, and we had gone on a mission trip, and there was about, I think, 25, 30 of us that had gone on this mission trip to Ukraine, and part of the trip, so we were there for about a week, and then we spent 3 or 4 days in Israel before we came home, and so this was my first time in the Middle East, and I quickly found out that life in the Middle East, people in the Middle East is just different. Just culture is different. It's not necessarily right or wrong. It's just different. Like, there's no personal space. There's no common courtesies of how you doing, that sort of thing. They don't care about that. And so we kind of quickly learned that this is a new culture, a new place, new experience. And so we had spent a couple of days just kind of seeing the sights and all of that. And then one afternoon they're like, hey, we've got some free time if you want to just go or whatever you want to do, hang out here at this place we were staying, or if you want to go about and get something to eat or whatever. So my wife and I, again, we were not married at the time, we were dating, and we said, hey, let's just go on out and we'll take a look around. And so we went, and we came to this area. We had some things we wanted to buy, and in particular, my wife was hoping to buy this chess set for her dad. And so we're kind of looking around, looking for this chess set, and they've got them all over the place. They're kind of known for this, made out of olive wood, and so we go into this area. It seems sketchy to me, but it was kind of dark, and it was just like this long hallway. Alley, and we were and all these shops kind of tucked in, and it was just like I don't know, it was just me, but I had thoughts of I just pictured Aladdin. This is what it felt like, and you're like, come and see my beautiful things, and that's exactly what it was like. And you're walking down, and these people are standing out, the owners of these shops are standing out in this hallway, this alley, and they're trying to lure you into their shop to see their stuff. And so we had gone into a few. We went to this one shop, and this guy. And one thing that I had learned also is it seems as though America is the only place where there is a price tag on something that's what you're going to pay. Pretty much any other part of the world, that's just a suggestion, or that's a starting point. And so you negotiate, and they expect that you're going to kind of wheel and deal with them. And so we go into the shop, and he's like, what are you looking for? And I said, well, we're kind of looking for a chess set. He said, oh, I have some beautiful chess sets. And he takes us to this place, and we started going back and forth on what we would offer, or what he would take, and finally he said, I give you a good deal. And this is my bottom dollar. And so we're like, okay, well, we're going to kind of look around and see, and we'll be back. And so we left, we went somewhere else, and it turns out we found the chess set cheaper. And so we bought it. And so we're coming back down, but we had to pass this guy's shop. And as we're coming down, the guy is standing right there in the alley. And I'm like, oh. And so my wife, she's got this thing in the bag. And I'm like, put it behind your back. And so we're walking down, and he's going, and he's got this smile on his face, and it says, so you come back, look at my shop. And he's like, well, what you got there? I'm like, oh, man. And he takes a look at the bag. He opens it up, and he says, hey, I told you I'd give you a good deal. And then he takes my hand, and he does one of these, and he pushes me against the wall. And I'm standing against the wall, and he's going, I told you I would get, he's got like this smile on his face, like a crazy man. And it's like, I told you I'd give you a good deal. And I'm just like, just let go of my hand, man. Just let go of my hand. Like, what is this? And I really don't recall anything else that was going on. Eventually, he just let me go, and we just hightailed it out of there. Went to the first opening we could see. We saw some daylight, and we were just like, let's get out of here. And there was this guard standing at this door. We walked through the door, and we walk into this beautiful garden. And it's like, what just happened? And so we're holding hands, we're walking down, and then all of a sudden, this woman comes up and she's screaming at us, and we have no idea what she's saying. She's just like, I have no idea. It's this other language, and we have no clue what's going on. And we're like, what? And we're just walking, and like, what's going on? And she's looking at her hands, and she's doing this. Well, apparently, we found ourselves in the garden of the Temple Mount, which is pretty sacred space for Muslims, and you don't show any affection at the Temple Mount. And so we're like, you know what? I think maybe we ought to just go back to the hotel and just be with some people that we know, some Americans, because we just don't belong here. This is crazy. But here's the thing. That was an experience, but we go through like life where it seems as though it is one thing after another. It is like one hardship after another. It is one frustration after another. It is one difficulty after another, where nothing is easy and everything is hard. And we're always looking for a way to deal with it. I mean, doesn't it seem like this is what really, like the majority of our life is like, all right, here's what's next. Here's what we're facing now. So how are we going to get through this? Like, we got an issue in the family. All right, hold on. Here we go. How are we going to deal with this? We got a sickness. We got this diagnosis. All right, hold on. Here, how are we going to deal with this? And it just seems like it's just one thing after another. It's just, if it's not an issue with family, it's an issue with health. If it's not that, it's a financial thing. It's a job thing. It's something. It is always something. And it seems like most of our life is just, how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to get through this? How are we going to get some sort of peace? And so our culture, obviously they're not blind to this. This is our common experience. And so our culture comes to us in different ways. And science would say, hey, no, what you need is we're developing. And so we're progressing to the point where that science is going to be able to give you all of your answers. Or humanism would say, no, you just need to look within yourself because you've got what it takes within yourself. Or religion would say, you need to do enough good things, and God then will have favor upon you, and he will help you out. Or escapism would say, no, just don't think about it. Just don't think about it. Or optimism would say, you just need to go after living your best life now. Just pour everything into finding your best life now. It's not as bad as you think it is. Or mysticism would say, look, you just need to chill out, smoke some weed, and forget all about it. And all of this, every one of these culture would throw all of these things out. Like, here's the answer. Here's how you get through it. Here's how you deal with it. Here's how you have peace. But all of it is wrong because it puts the weight on you. As long as we can do this. It puts the weight on you, and it will crush you. But what we find in 1 Peter is that it gives us the answer that doesn't just give us a way to cope with life, but it gives us the answer that solves the question of meaning and purpose and hope and assurance and peace. And so then if you're a follower of Jesus, we've got problems enough, right? We've got problems. But if you're a follower of Jesus, like how do you live as a follower of Jesus in the midst of all of that? Like how do you follow Jesus? How do you live as a Christian in the midst of all that? And 1 Peter is going to help us out because 1 Peter is written to a group of people who are following Jesus in life. And if life wasn't hard enough, they're finding that following Jesus in this life got a whole lot more difficult. And so this is what we find in 1 Peter. Let's open it up. Here we go. Verse 1 says this: Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. And so then, back then, in that time, when you would write a letter, you would identify yourself at the top, instead of at the end, like we're used to, which to me just makes a whole lot of sense. Just right off the bat, tell you this is who's coming at you. Here's who's writing this letter. So he identifies himself as Peter, and not just anybody, but Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, the apostle of Jesus Christ. This is who we have here. This is Peter, which right away should give us some encouragement, because if you know anything about Peter, you know that Peter's life was a bit of a disaster. Now, I'm not saying that you should find encouragement because your life is a disaster, but just in case that you're not all put together and you're wondering if could God ever do anything with you, Peter's life, like when you think about Peter's life, it should encourage you. Like the first time that we meet Peter in Luke chapter 5, Peter had just come in from a fishing all night long. It was his job. It's what he did. It's how he made a living. It's how he took care of his family. He fished, and so he came in all night. He came in fishing all night because that's what you would do. You would fish when the water's cool, and the fish would rise to the top, and so it just made sense. And so he would fish all night. He'd come in. He hadn't caught a fish all night, not one. And he's frustrated. He's on his boat. He's at the dock. He's frustrated because he hadn't caught anything. He's putting his nets together. He's cleaning them. He's folding them up, getting ready to put them away. In the meantime, there's this guy, this teacher that is teaching on the shore at the beach, and the crowd is getting bigger and bigger. And Jesus, his name is Jesus, and he's pushing back, and he actually gets on Peter's boat. And Peter hears what he's saying, but he's got his own thing going on. He's ready to call it a night. He's been out all night, no success. He's got to come back the next night, hopefully, to make up for what he had lost. So Jesus gets in Peter's boat as Peter is wrapping up the nets, ready to go home. And here's what Jesus says. Jesus says, "Hey, why don't you put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch?" And Peter, he says, "Master, we've toiled all night and we haven't caught anything." Now, this is Peter's first encounter with Jesus. And Peter's trying to not be rude here. But he's going, "Look, I'm a fisherman. You're not. All right? You're a teacher. I'm not saying anything about your teaching. I'm just telling you I'm a fisherman. I know something about fishing. We don't fish in the daytime. The water gets warm, the fish go deep. We don't fish in the day. It doesn't happen. We've done it. We're done." But he's trying to be nice. He doesn't want to be rude. And so here's what he says to Jesus. He says, "Okay, but at your word, I'll let down the nets." Can you hear a tinge of hesitancy there? Maybe even a skepticism there? Look, just to appease you. I'm a fisherman. I kind of know how this thing goes, but okay, all right, I'll let down the nets. And then there was that night when Peter and the disciples were on the boat, and Jesus came walking on the water to them. You remember this? They're on the boat. Jesus comes walking on the water, and then he identifies himself. Jesus, he says this. He said, "Look, take heart," because they're freaking out, which makes sense. "Take heart. It is I," Jesus says, "It is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him. He's like, "Lord, if it is you," he's like, "I just told you it was me, right? If it's you, command me to come to you on the water." And so Jesus tells Peter to get out of the boat, and Peter gets out of the boat and begins walking on the water. He's walking on the water, and he's walking towards Jesus. And then all of a sudden, he begins to be, he's aware of what's going on. He sees the waves. He sees the wind. And all of a sudden, he begins to lose confidence. He begins to lose faith. And he's not losing faith in himself. He's not losing confidence in himself because he knows this ain't because of me. He begins to lose his confidence in Jesus. He begins to lose faith in Jesus. And then he starts to sink. And so Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Oh, what about the time when James, Peter, and John were with Jesus in the garden, and they were supposed to be praying with Jesus? Remember this? And Jesus goes to pray, and he comes back. He just keeps finding them asleep. But then the guards show up to take Jesus, to arrest Jesus, to take him away. And when the guard comes to take Jesus, do you remember what Peter did? How Peter responded in that moment? He takes out his sword and he takes the ear off of one of the guys. Like, even though Jesus had said, look, this is the way it's got to go down. He had told his disciples over and over, this is the way it's going to go. They're going to take me. I'm going to die, but then I'm going to rise again. This is just how it's going to play out. This is what I'm here for. And Peter's going, nope, that's not the way it's going to go down. I'll handle this, Jesus. And Peter just makes a mess of things. And then that same night, the night that he was so brave and so eager, because after all, he had said, he had swore to Jesus, I'll never leave you. I'll never leave you. Well, Jesus is taken away, and not once, not twice, but 3 times, Peter denies that he's even a follower of Jesus. And so in John chapter 21, and you can imagine, and this is right before Jesus died, and so Jesus goes on, he goes to the cross, God raises him from the dead. And in John 21, we see this encounter between Jesus and Peter. And Jesus meets Peter out on the beach, and Peter is drowning in guilt over what he had done. And Jesus restores Peter to say, I'm not done with you. That is who is writing this letter. This is Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. And here's the thing. Jesus knows all about this in Peter's life. He knows all about these things that Peter would do, and knows all about Peter's hesitancy and his tendency to be ashamed and his tendency to open his mouth before he should open his mouth. He knows all of this about Peter before he ever stepped into Peter's boat. Now listen, if you know this about Peter, if you know this is who he is, this is the kind of guy that he is, Peter's not your first pick, right? Like, he doesn't have the reputation as one who will accomplish anything great. He's an ordinary, nothing special, opens his mouth way too soon, blue-collar, average kind of guy. When the Son of God is picking a team to turn the world upside down, of all the ones that Jesus could pick, Peter's not making the top 12, right? He's a mess. He's a joke. And yet, not only is Peter in the top 12, he's in the top 3. And many scholars would say, he's actually the top, that he was the lead. Let me ask you, have you ever looked at all of this? All of these things that we do here, you read through this and you hear these things. Have you ever just sat down and considered these things and you're trying to match it up with life? And has it ever caused you to be skeptical about this, about Jesus? Have you ever been going through some stuff in your life and because stuff is just so overwhelming and you're suffering in such a way that you just begin to lose faith in Jesus? Have you ever not trusted Jesus to come through for you, or to come through in some situation, so you just decide, okay, obviously it's going to be up to me. I got to handle this. Have you ever found yourself not wanting to associate with Jesus because you're ashamed or because you're embarrassed? Have you ever been so overcome with guilt from something that you've done that you're sure that God is done with you? Or perhaps you sit here today and you're going, man, you talk about being in a place you don't belong? Man, I don't feel like I belong here. If these people knew me, if these people knew what I've done, if these people knew the real me, my life is a disaster. Listen, we're not even into the first full sentence of this letter, and already God is saying to you, you're not hopeless. You're not finished. You're not a lost cause. I'm coming to you. I'm hunting you down. I want to use you, and it's not because of you, but in spite of you. And not because you're good and you've done anything great, but because I'm good. This is what we get from just the introduction. Just the first line of this letter. It's not over. Trust him. Take whatever little bit of faith that you have and trust him. And God will take that faith and he will do something in your life. And he can do something in your life even today, even in this moment. And so he says, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. And then he says, this is who I'm writing to. To those who are elect exiles of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. In general terms, Peter is writing to Jews and Gentiles that had become followers of Jesus, that are living in this part of the world that makes up what we know today as Turkey. And he calls them the dispersion. Now this is just in its simplest form. Look, this is just to say that they are followers of Jesus, living in a place that are not followers, that were among a people that are not followers of Jesus. He's just recognizing you are a people who are following Jesus in a place where people are not following Jesus. You're the dispersion, is what he's saying. And this is what this letter is about. How do you follow Jesus in a place among a people who don't follow Jesus? Especially when following Jesus in that place among those people, it will cost you something. It will cause you to suffer even. Well, Peter is going to spend the first part of this letter to say, before you know how to live, before you know how to go out and do that, you need to know who you are. You need to know who you, when you know who you are, you'll know what to do. You'll know how to live. And so right out of the gate, he says, listen, here's who you are. You are elect exiles. That's who you are. You are elect exiles. So what is that? What is an exile? Well, in kind of its broad sense, an exile is someone who lives in a place that it's not their home. They live in a place that's not their home. So why would someone be in a place, living in a place that's not their home? Or maybe there could be a couple of possibilities. Maybe they're a tourist. Maybe it's a temporary, like this temporary residence. They don't have any intention of becoming a citizen of that country or that place. They're just kind of visiting. So they're not there to make friends. They're not there to learn the language or adapt to that culture. You're just visiting. You stay in hotels that you're familiar with people that you came with who speak your language. You look for food that you're used to. You get really upset when you don't find Starbucks. It's like this. It's this country. If the country is going through some stuff, if they're going through some political stuff, some social challenges, it's not really your concern because you're not connected to them. You're just in and then you're out. You're just visiting. You're a tourist. Now, if we can just stop here for a moment and let's just be real. This is the way a lot of Christians are. A lot of Christians live like this. They stay with people just like them. They don't ever involve themselves in the community and people that live among them. They just keep to themselves. The problems of their community are not really a concern to them because, hey, we're just not all that involved here. We got our own thing going on here. They just see themselves as I'm just passing through. I'm just passing through. I'm just waiting for God to just come and snatch me out, to rapture me out. But that's not what it is. That's not what it means to be an exile. So if you're living in a country that isn't your home and you're not a tourist, then maybe you're an immigrant, right? You're not from that country. It's not your home, but you want it to be. I mean, I want it to be. I'm kind of hoping I can settle down here and this become my home. And truth is, this is what a lot of Christians are doing with this world. They may say that this world, because, this is a popular phrase, this world's not my home. They may say this world is not their home, but actually you look at their lives and it seems as though it is. It seems like this is what it's all about. Just trying to live my best life now because this is all I've got. And so they take their money and they take their time and they dump it all into making this life their home, this world their home. They're consumed with the things that they have and they get all worried and anxious about the things they don't have. But that's not what it means to be an exile. Exile in the Greek, which is the original language of 1 Peter, is a word that refers to a resident alien. A resident alien. A resident alien or exile is not a tourist because as an exile, you live in the place. You know the language, you have a job here, you have friends here, you're part of the community, but you're not a citizen. You don't necessarily adopt like all the values of this place. You don't necessarily adopt all the practices and you don't go along with all the traditions and the customs of that place. And you're not an immigrant because you're not settling in to try to make this your home because you know that home is somewhere else. And so what happens is that you have neighbors who like you, but they still think you're kind of odd because you're not just like them. And it's not simply because you have different ideas or beliefs, but you're just not all in on the way of life in this place. You're living on a passport because you're not expecting to stay here. Listen, Christian, follower of Jesus, this is who we are. We are exiles. We're exiles. We're not tourists. We're not just passing through. We're engaged with the people who are here, with those that are here. But we're not immigrants. We're not looking to settle in, but we're not citizens. We're exiles. We're pilgrims. We're not at home. We're on our way home, but we're not at home. This is why this place, this world, it will never be completely satisfying to you. It's why you will struggle with how things are going down here. It's because you're not home. Listen, anybody who knows me well knows that I am a homebody. Like I just rather just be at home. Like many times my wife's like, "You want to go out?" I'm like, "Or we could stay home," you know. But I do like to go out sometime. I mean, I like to travel. We like to, I like to go see new places and experience new things and go on trips. I like to go out of the country and do all of that. But it never fails. At any time that I'm on a trip somewhere, always comes a moment in that trip where I'm going, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to go home. I mean, it could be just a fantastic, we're experiencing, seeing a lot of great things and all of that, but there always comes a time at that time where I'm away from home, I'm going, okay, I'm kind of ready to go back home. Like when you've been away from your home for a while and you finally get home and you get to sleep in your own bed, man, that is awesome. Like that is awesome. There's no bed like your bed. No bed like your bed. That's because my bed, it fits me. My bed fits me. And this is what happens with a home. The longer that you live at home, the more that home, it just fits you. It just kind of fits the way that you are and how it just makes sense to you. It just fits you. That's because you're making that home fit for you. Everything at home fits. When you're at home, everything just fits. It's where it needs to be. It's just right. When you're at home, you're satisfied. But we're not home. We're not home. We're exiles. When you read the Bible, you read about somebody like Abraham who was told, God said, hey, I don't want you to take what you have, and I want you to leave this place. Leave your home. Just go. I'm doing something new through you. I got something that I'm doing. I'm going to make a nation through you. Get out of here. When the nation of Israel became a nation, how many times were they living their lives in exile? They were in Babylon. They were in Egypt. But it's not just an Israel thing. All the way back to the garden, Adam and Eve, in a place completely satisfied, completely at home. Everything is perfect. Adam and Eve have all that they need. They fully enjoy the work that they have to do. They have all the food that they could want. There's no need for clothes. God just said, be fruitful and multiply. I mean, things are very good, all right? Just one rule. Just don't eat from that tree right there. If you do, you'll die. And so we know what happens. We know how this all goes. Through their disobedience, sin enters into the world, and they are exiled from home. He removes them from the garden. What was perfect, what was paradise, was lost, and they find themselves in a world that doesn't fit. This isn't home. And this is us. This world doesn't fit. It's a struggle. It's always a struggle. Something is off. And listen, you don't even have to believe in God to see this. I mean, you're here this morning and you don't believe in God. You're not like, I'm not really into this. I'm not a Christian. I'm skeptical about this whole thing. Listen, you don't have to buy into that to know that this is true. That life is hard and you're wondering, why in the world am I so unhappy? Because you're in exile and you don't even know it. And it should make you wonder, if there is no God, And if all we are is a product of evolution, where everything just evolves and adapts to the world that we live in, I mean, we've been here a long time. We've been occupying this planet for a long time. Why haven't we adapted to things? Why haven't we adapted to the way things are to where we're just good with it? Why does injustice and abuse and death still bother us? Why haven't we just adapted to these things? It's because we're in a place where we don't belong. We weren't made for this. Christian, we are elect exiles. Like, if it's not bad enough, here we are, we're in this place, and we're trying to live the way of Jesus, and it's really hard. We are exiles. Well, how did we get here? How do we get to this place where we are exiled? We're in a place among a people where we just don't belong. How does this happen? Peter tells us in verse 2. He says, according to the foreknowledge of God the Father in the sanctification of the Spirit for obedience to Jesus Christ and for sprinkling with his blood. How does someone become an exile? Well, first, Peter says, we were chosen according to the foreknowledge of God the Father. We were chosen. You are an elect exile. You are a chosen exile. Chosen according to the foreknowledge of God the Father. You have been chosen according to the foreknowledge of God the Father. If you are a Christian, a follower of Jesus, listen, it is because God has chosen you. Now, I know that we get really nervous when we talk about this, or rather when we read it in the Bible. And we want to go, well, wait a second. What about whoever calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved? What about whoever confesses with their mouth that Jesus is Lord and believes in their heart that God raised him from the dead? Then you will be saved. That sounds a lot like I did the choosing. Sounds a lot like I did the calling. I did the confessing. I did the believing. Well, here's what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches us in Ephesians chapter 2 especially, we see that you and I are dead. We're dead in our sins. Dead in our sins. Dead. I don't know if you know, but dead things don't do much, right? They don't express faith. They don't choose anything. They don't believe anything. Dead is dead. Dead is dead. And Paul tells us in Ephesians 2 that we were dead in our sins. No way of expressing faith. Dead in your sins. And if you have called on Jesus to save you, because God did this. Well, how did God do this? How did God make all this happen? In the sanctification of the Spirit. In the sanctification of the Spirit. That God chose you, and by means of his Spirit, he woke you up. He gave you faith to believe in the gospel, that you are a sinner in need of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection on your behalf, and coming to see this as true. It was God that did that. It was God that woke you up. It was God that gave you faith to believe. It's God that opened your eyes to see. It was God, and so in doing so, and God giving you faith to believe and opening your eyes to see this, then you called upon him to save you. That was God doing this the whole time. So then why does God do this? He says, for obedience to Jesus Christ. For obedience to Jesus Christ. God chose you. He set you apart from the world by means of his Spirit for obedience to Jesus Christ. So that you might live the way of Jesus. Listen, I want you to hear, I want you to be able to bring these two together. The way of Jesus and the way that you were created to live your life are the same thing. It's the same thing. The way life was created to go and the way of Jesus, that's the same thing. Jesus is leading you into the way, his way, the way that you were created to live. And so when God saved you, he saved you for obedience to Jesus Christ so that you might live the way of Jesus, so that you would live life and have the ability to finally live your life the way life was meant to be lived, the kind of life that fits you. The life of following the way of Jesus. And then Peter closes this greeting out with this. He says, may grace and peace be multiplied to you. May grace and peace be multiplied to you. When you hear the word grace, you should just hear it's me getting something I don't deserve. May what you don't deserve be multiplied to you. I've got to believe that when Peter said, may grace and peace be multiplied to you, that meant something to Peter. And that wasn't just a throwaway statement. That wasn't just well, it sounds good in this opening of this letter. I have to believe that meant something to him. Peter, who was chosen by Jesus, but just kept making a mess of things, even denying that he even belonged to Jesus. So this was right before Jesus was crucified, right? He denied Jesus 3 times right before Jesus was crucified. And after Jesus had been raised to life, you remember what Peter was doing? You remember what Jesus found Peter doing after Jesus had raised from the dead? He's fishing. Jesus found Peter fishing. And Peter had just gone back to the old life. He's like, it was a good 3-year run, but man, I made a mess of that. Now, whatever he has for me, it's gone. I just might as well go back to the life that I knew. But then something beautiful happens. Jesus comes after Peter. He finds him in the boat, much like he found him in the boat when he first met him. And he calls him to the beach. And Peter can hardly look at Jesus standing there on the beach. And yet Jesus assures Peter that he's not done with him. And Peter didn't choose Jesus. Jesus chose Peter. And it certainly wasn't because of anything special in Peter. Peter's going, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. But it's like Jesus is saying to Peter, it's not about you, man. It's never been about you. Can I just remind you of where you came from? It's not about you. You're nothing spectacular. You're a fisherman. You're just average, regular folk. Just curious, how many average, regular folk do we have here today? We're just a bunch of average, regular folk. That's Peter. He's a regular guy. He's not a king. He's not anybody special. He's a fisherman. He's just a regular guy. But then Paul says in 1 Corinthians 1, but God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. In other words, for all of his, well, I just can't. I'm not good enough. I have a past. I've done one thing after another. I've made one mistake, one failure after another. For all of Peter's excuses, he's just building a case for God to use him. And God's going, exactly. And that's why I chose you. Because when it's all said and done, nobody would ever believe that you did this. And so Jesus, he restores Peter. And then Jesus, he ascends back into heaven. And right after Jesus ascends back into heaven, Peter is out on the streets in Jerusalem. Check this. The guy who just denied he ever knew Jesus to a little girl is now, just a few days later, just a few weeks later, he's out on the street. This same guy, this same Peter, is out on the street, and he gets up on a bucket somewhere, or gets up in a window somewhere in the streets of Jerusalem, and he preaches. He preaches this message of Jesus, and he boldly declares who Jesus is, and he's telling the people that this is who he was. You denied him, but I denied him, but he is the one. God raised him from the dead, and on that day, 3,000 people who denied that, had seen the miracles of Jesus, but denied that he was the Son of God, 3,000 of them put their faith and trust in Jesus Christ and said, I want to be a follower of him. That was Peter. It was Peter. The next day, Peter and John, They get brought before, they get arrested, and they're brought before the high priest and his council. And the council are putting them on trial, and they say, listen, we'll let you go, but you've got to promise something, that you will never do anything, you'll never say anything in the name of this Jesus ever again. And so Peter, he just goes right off. And he turns right back to them, and he says, listen, this Jesus that you're talking about, he is the one that you killed. But God raised him from the dead, and there is salvation in nobody else but Jesus. This is Peter. And so the next verse, it says this in Acts 4. It says that when they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were, listen, uneducated, common men, they were astonished. And they recognized that they had been with Jesus. You see, that's what God choosing Peter was all about. It wasn't about Peter. It was about Jesus. Nobody would believe that Peter could be anybody used by God. He's a bumbling mess. Only Jesus could do that. And so, God says, exactly. So you don't worry about success. You just be obedient. And that's where you will find that I'm glorified. Listen, the Bible never shies away from the reality of life. I'm just telling you, if I'm writing the Bible and I'm trying to get a bunch of people to believe it, I'm trying to convince you of this, I'm trying to get a culture who's dead in their sin to believe, if I want Christianity to sound appealing, then listen, I'm just thinking, I'm taking out the parts about, well, you're going to be exiled. It's going to be hard. You're going to suffer. I'm just going to take all that part out. But one of the reasons that you should actually trust the Bible is because it doesn't take any of that out. It just deals with the reality of life. And part of that reality is suffering. The Bible doesn't give us a picture of, well, just believe in God and things are going to go great for your life. No, the Bible tells us follow Jesus and you'll be exiled. Peter's going to say here in just a few verses, just in the next chapter, he's going to say, look, you follow Jesus, then don't be surprised at the fire you find yourself in. You're an exiled people. You've been chosen, given faith to believe, and eyes to see the life the way it was meant to be lived, to live the way of Jesus. And living the way of Jesus is in this place among these people, it will put you in the fire. And some of you are walking through it right now. Some of you are walking through that right now. You're following Jesus and you're on the job, and it's just, there's parts of you just going, man, I feel like it'd be a lot easier if I just wasn't a believer. Just being honest with you, just being straight with you. There have been times being a father, trying to raise my kids to love and pursue Jesus and show them who Jesus is and live the way of Jesus. There have been times, if I can just admit it to you, there have been times I thought, I think it would be easier if I wasn't a Christian dad. If I wasn't trying to lead them in this way. Some of you feel that. And God hears you. And may grace and peace be multiplied to you. Some of you have been following Jesus, and perhaps you've just made a mess of it. And you're feeling like in this moment today, like it's just over. Like maybe God had something for me. Maybe there was a thing that he had for me, but I've just since just made a mess of things. And so whatever that is, I've got like plan B or C or D or whatever it is, but it's not plan A. May grace and peace be multiplied to you. May what you don't deserve be multiplied to you. May what you feel, I don't deserve this, yes, may that be multiplied to you. Well, how is that possible? the sprinkling of the blood of Jesus for you, for me, in our place. And so have you called on Jesus? Like, have you called on Jesus? Do you believe that you are a sinner in need of a Savior? Do you believe that the way of Jesus is the way life was meant to go? Do you feel that we're not at home here? Do you feel the brokenness? And not just out there, but in here, in your own life. And do you believe that Jesus is that Savior? Do you believe that he is the resurrected King? And would you call upon him today to save you? This is the hope that we have. It is the greatest hope that we've ever known. Would you call upon him to save you? It is true. Whoever calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. If you confess Jesus, that he is the King, the resurrected King, with your mouth, you confess that with your mouth, and you believe in your heart that God did raise him from the dead, then you will be saved. Have you done that? I hope that you will. It's my hope that God is opening up eyes to see that this is true. This is reality. Let's pray together.